I have a long history with the Souls games. My entry into the series was the original Dark Souls. I have spent multiple hundreds of hours into it. I purchased it on every platform available. The atmosphere and the gameplay enthralled me. In particular, the combat system drew me into the game. I really enjoyed the amount of freedom it gave to the player. This eventually led me to PvP, where I would then dump an incredible amount of time into. I would go on to play the spiritual predecessor Demon's Souls. I only really beat this game once, and I enjoyed my time with the entry, but I really need to go back and play the game sometime. Needless to say, Dark Souls 2 was announced, and I was pretty excited about it. In my mind, Dark Souls 2 was going to be Dark Souls 1, but with every single aspect better. Needless to say, for multiple reasons, Dark Souls 2 immensely disappointed me. Fast forward to the launch of Bloodborne, and it's great. I'm a little more than halfway through the game at this point, and I'm really enjoying it. While Bloodborne still has many aspects of a Souls game, it distinguishes itself from the rest of the series. Over time, the series has changed, but this is the first time where there has been dramatic changes to how the game plays. Other than gameplay spoilers, this video will only have footage up to the first two bosses. The biggest change in Bloodborne is the combat design. The changes made in Bloodborne are some of my favorites in the entire Souls series. Overall, it's much faster. When you're locked on, instead of rolling, the player does a quick dash. Dashing gives the player much more options. You can still play defensively and bait out enemy attacks, or you can dash behind them to get a hit in. This mechanic adds this frenetic energy that was missing in previous Souls games. The regain mechanic lets the player regain lost health by attacking an enemy. Because of this, playing aggressive is rewarded in Bloodborne. The changes to parrying and backstabbing are also welcome. Before, they were pretty easy to pull off. Bloodborne adds a layer of risk to each and every backstab and parry. Parrying uses resources, and backstabbing requires the player to time their actions correctly. To make up for the faster paced combat, Bloodborne has a larger number of enemies in any given scenario. Enemy encounters work differently from before. Instead of the tight spaces of previous games, Bloodborne opens up its level design. Areas generally have much more space than before. The player can see most of the enemies before fighting them. This allows the player to take in the environment and develop a strategy. The first area does an excellent job of teaching this to the player for the rest of the game. This kind of strategic planning is very reminiscent of trotting carefully through the tightly packed corridors seen in previous games. Another welcomed change to the series is the transforming weapons. Some weapons use this mechanic to transform to an entirely new weapon, others use it to extend out a player's combo. In previous Souls games, weapons were characterized by their type. The type of each weapon would determine the general moveset with some minor deviations across the weapons of the same type. Each type would generally have 3 to 10 weapons each. The differences between most weapons in previous games would be similar to the saw blade and saw spear. Bloodborne makes each weapon unique. In general, Bloodborne has a much smaller scope comparatively. This leads to some key Souls games characteristics being diminished. There's less weapons, consumables, armor sets, etc. Covenants have taken a hit as well. Currently, I can only speculate, but I feel like the lack of covenants will have a negative impact on PvP. The randomly generated chalice dungeons try to make up for the smaller scope of Bloodborne, but they feel flat. Due to random generation, all the sense of direction and visual design present in the main game is lost. All the rooms feel like cubes attached to each other. Each level of the dungeon plays out very similarly. That being said, it's nice to see enemies and bosses that are exclusive to the dungeon. It would have been very easy for From Software just to take enemy designs and reuse them. Changing the core gameplay systems in any series is a bold move. Oftentimes it can backfire, but From Software managed to pull this off effectively. Even with the reduced amount of content in the game, the dramatic changes to the combat system, in my eyes, make up for it. Keeping the series fresh is very important for the future of this subgenre. Bloodborne did this pretty well, but I fear as more games are inspired by Souls, they'll become a trend that steals from it rather than expands upon it in any meaningful way. Bloodborne shows that there's room to innovate, and overall it's just generally a good evolution of the series.